in Japan along with Kiko and Estuko. She's actually born in Britain, where they're now living. And so Estuko is recalling her neighbor who she used to live next to, Sachiko. She lives in this sort of like run-down shack that has somehow survived one of the bombs, and she lives with her daughter Mariko in this terrible poverty. And so as she's recalling it, you start to notice that Estuko and Sachiko actually have a lot of parallels and a lot of things in common. For instance, at the time, they both have one daughter, they're both widowed, and they both actually have the same dream of going to America. And so, as the novel progresses, you start to see that Sachiko is very abusive to her daughter Mariko. She does things like she won't feed her if she's misbehaving for days at a time, and she's very verbally abusive. The worst incident I'll actually get to in a little bit, but when she's looking back on it, you can see that Estuko is expressing like a very big feeling of guilt for having not done anything to stop the abuse she was seeing just next door. And so as this book continues, you start to see that Estuko feels guilty not only just for the daughter, but also for how she's raising her own daughter. And that's why she wants to bring her daughter to America, so she can get out of this poverty that they've been living in and actually give her like a good life. And so that's when you can start to see the cultural differences come out. Oh, I can skip that slide. So the cultural differences are really seen through Estuko's interaction with her new husband, who you actually never get the name of. He's just this British guy who she marries, and it's not really important to the plot. But they eventually make an agreement that they are going to go to the UK and live there. And Estuko has she's sort of unsure about how she feels about this. She's lived in Japan her whole life, and she's never really known anything other than Japanese way of life. And so then eventually Estuko gets pregnant, and she's having their second daughter. So of course she presses for a more Japanese name, and her husband is pressing for a more Western name, and they settle on Nikki. And you can see that it still has Japanese remnants in how it's spelled, but it's actually a more sort of Western name than it is Eastern. And so, anyway, I just put this in there. So as the novel continues, and the narration, there is a spoiler warning because I knew you would be upset. So if you don't want to hear it, just So as the novel continues, Estuko really goes on to explain how moving to the UK really affected her and her daughter a lot. Estuko became slightly depressed, but Kiko took it really badly. She stopped going to school, she wouldn't socialize, and she wasn't even eating her dinner. And she becomes incredibly withdrawn, and after a few days of having not seen her, they actually find her in her room, and she had hung herself. So obviously there's a lot of tragedy goes on, and they actually get a divorce, so Estuko is now living alone. So whenever Nikki comes to visit and they're talking about the suicide and everything, this is where the spoiler is, by the way. No. So as she's recalling events with her next door neighbor Sachiko, there's one incident where she feels especially bad for it. Sachiko had just gotten Mariko a puppy, and Mariko had been misbehaving. So what she did was she took the puppy, she put it in a burlap sack, and so she goes towards the river. Midway through the narrative of this scene, Estuko switches from a third person to a first person. And it's revealed that that Sachiko never actually existed, nor did Mariko. This was actually all her recount of how she treated her daughter the entire time they were in Japan. She did horrible things to her. She was verbally abusive, she starved her, she hit her, and she tried to drown her puppy. And that's really where... No, the puppy lived, don't worry.
Oh my god, really?
I can just end it there, but... So right after this revelation, Nikki kind of starts looking at Estuko a little differently, obviously. And that's actually where the novel starts to kind of come to a conclusion. But obviously you can see that that's where the main themes of guilt and regret come out. Because, I mean, this woman regretted something so much that she literally made up another person to project all of her feelings onto. And that's my talk.